And joining us now is writer and activist Katie Klabusich. You can find her online at Katie_speak on Twitter and katiespeak.com. Katie, thank you for joining us today.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Thank you so much for joining us today. I wish I could say I'm doing better, and I'm sure you feel the same way.
Yeah, thanks for having Ian on before me because he's got all that legal expertise. I just have the righteous outrage and the uterus that is now the political stomping ground. I can't believe, what he said about the challenge to the minimum wage on First Amendment grounds that says every dollar McDonald's spends on its employees is a dollar it can't use on free speech. In that case, the Hobby Lobby decision reduces the First Amendment rights of their some 13,000 employees because they're going to have less money because if they're going to be double billed for their prescriptions. It's going to be like going back to the pre-Affordable Care Act days for them.
Yes. And so let's get down to this. Like you just mentioned, we had Ian Millhiser on before to talk about, the legal aspects of the Hobby Lobby case, which effectively, Hobby Lobby is this arts and crafts store that basically didn't want to cover women's contraception after the Obamacare mandate. And so they took it to court, and SCOTUS has ruled that they do not have to pay because of their religious beliefs for contraception. And this is enraging because it's certainly a war on women, and certainly a war specifically on poor women who cannot afford this contraception. They were receiving it as part of their health care before.
Yeah, it's enraging for everyone because basically we just went from corporations are people, which is bad enough, to corporations are religious people,
yes.
Which now means no matter who you are, when you're interviewing for a job, you now have to interview your employer to find out their religious beliefs to see if something of yours will be taken away based on that. And everybody knows that low income and communities of color are the ones most affected, like you said, because they're the ones who are have the least bargaining power in an interview with their employer. It's not like a Hobby Lobby employee is able to discern, whether or not that employer or the other employer or McDonald's or somebody else is gonna discriminate on them based on their religious beliefs.
Yeah. And let's be clear too, when we're talking about religious beliefs, we're talking about Christians, because if this was a case where this devout Muslim company, Muslim-owned company, wanted all the women to wear head coverings, and the women there had a problem with it. First of all, this fantastical case would have never even made it to the Supreme Court. And second of all, I highly doubt it would have ruled in their favor.
Yeah, there's no way. You'd have right-wingers running around screaming about Sharia law all over the place, and how you can't have Sharia law in a workplace, and they're all invading, and careful it'll spread like a disease. It's just, and let's be clear. Most likely, even if that case were to happen, which it wouldn't, that company would probably be a smaller, closer to a mom and pop actual store, like a corner store that's owned by a small family that has tight religious beliefs. Hobby Lobby, according to Forbes, has more than 20,000 employees and pulled in $3.3 billion in 2013. This is not a small store on the corner who's upset that their knitting needles are somehow going to be used for something, insidious. This is a big company in the top 100 in Forbes.
Listen, if you are an arts and crafts person out there, I implore you to stop your Hobby Lobby shopping and do all your shopping at your local mom and pop stores. And if there is none there, then at least go to a Michael's, because as far as I know, until I find something bad about them, which I'm sure there will be something. But yeah, let's stop shopping at Hobby Lobby, arts and crafts people, knitters, all you people who do all that type of stuff.
Just stop knitting, I would just add. I'm sorry. Just stop.
There's another several dozen other companies. We're calling it the Hobby Lobby case because it's got a nice hashtag and it's easy to say, and they were the lead plaintiff. But you'd be shocked. Go check out the Center for Reproductive Rights website and find the dozens of places that you're now angry at.
Mm-hmm. So I'm also glad you brought up the issue with, the mom and pop businesses and just how big Hobby Lobby actually is. Because in this ruling, Alito goes on to say that it's for, closely held. That's his his phrasing, closely held companies. And what this means, closely held, it's not, Alito talking about how no one holds him at night and he's feeling lonely. It's 50% of a company has to be owned by 5 or less people. That's a closely held company. A company like Mars, for example, huge company, would fall under this definition.
Yes.
I mean, that's just unbelievable to me. It's just because they're a private company that didn't decide to, sell these shares to a large group of people or go public or whatever, they could literally, these 5 or less people could employ hundreds of thousands of people, millions maybe, and they're still being considered a small, closely held company.
Well, and it might be worse when you put it that way, right? So the beliefs of 5 people now overrides the beliefs of 13,000 people. I mean, what about my religious rights to not want to be pregnant? So, when I had to pay out of pocket for my health insurance for a decade, my birth control wasn't covered before the Affordable Care Act because my prescription plan chose not to cover it. And when I lost 3 jobs in a year, I couldn't afford the $80 for the name brand birth control that was all that worked for me. And I ended up pregnant. And that's what happens. What happens when you limit people's access to contraception is more unwanted pregnancies and more abortions. So if Hobby Lobby, who says that they oppose this handful of birth control, it's not all birth control, by the way, it's a handful, that they, despite all scientific evidence and all the expertise, they've decided that they think that this handful, IUDs in the morning after pill, are both abortive fashions. They think that they don't think they're contraception. They think that they cause abortion to happen, which is ridiculous.
Absolutely.
But because of that, for me, as someone who has an IUD, because it's what works best for me, suddenly my right to decide between my doctor and I what's best for my medical care is no longer applicable. Now it's up to my boss at Hobby Lobby should I decide to work there.
It's really unbelievable. And I also want to bring up, Hobby Lobby actually provided contraception previously as part of their health care plan. They actually provided women contraception if you worked there under the part of their benefits plan, and they never had a problem with it before. And then after the Obamacare mandate comes out, they still didn't know about it, and they still didn't have a problem with it until all of a sudden, apparently, in 2010, someone at Hobby Lobby decided to read through this thing, and they said, hey, wait a minute. We're going to be forced to do this now? How dare you? That's really what it comes down to. They didn't have a problem with this before. And on top of that, not even, as a side note, completely as part of that, they actually, as part of, their plans for, pension, etc., for their employees,
yes,
they invest in the companies that make these contraceptives.
Yep, they do. And this is typical, right? So as a corporate, business owner, my business decisions are somehow my private business, but my employees' decisions on what they do with earned compensation, by the way, because of how we put together health insurance in this country, even with the Affordable Care Act, which is just insurance reform, it's not health care reform. I'm a walking, breathing, advertisement for the Affordable Care Act, but I'm aware that it's just insurance reform. They're now saying that the 5 guys can do whatever they want with their investments, but when it comes to their employees, it's a totally different thing. It's ridiculous on its face, and it's not new. Remember when Huckabee was giving the whole Uncle Sugar speech? It turns out that when he was the governor of Arkansas, he presided over a prescription, a contraception mandate for the state of Arkansas. Mm-hmm. So he had no problem with it when he realized it was just good health care. But now that the right has gone so far to the right that the only way to be, a politician or a talking head or make your $1 million Fox News contract is to somehow go to the way right, suddenly he's against it too. So the same way Hobby Lobby used to not have a problem with it and suddenly does now that there's a liberal conspiracy to make it affordable and accessible, it's just what the right does now.
Yes. It's really at the point where you wonder, how far will this go? I mean, here you have the Supreme Court. I mean, they never really ruled like this before in terms of, actually looking at the law and not being a conservative, liberal, partisan type deal. But I mean, here they are at this point, not even paying attention to some of the things they previously ruled on. And they're just, taking such specific things and they're tweaking it, twisting it to fit what their ideology is, even if it contradicts something they may have ruled on before. I mean, it's getting to the point where it's just unbelievable. And I want to bring up, everyone listening to this is probably at the point where they're in a deep depression. So let's try to make everyone feel better as best as we could. I implore everyone, I'm still going through it, to go read Ginsburg had a 35-page dissent. Where
she's angry.
She is angry about this. And I guess if you want to feel good that at least someone in the Supreme Court was fighting for the right thing, go read that.
Three different female justices wrote dissents. That's how angry they are. Yes. It's how much they get it.
But it should also be noted that only Sotomayor agreed completely, fully with Ginsburg's dissent. So I mean, even then, it just shows you just how important it is to get some of these more the right people on the Supreme Court. When people say voting for the president's not important, this, if it anything, this is the reason. The people who dissented from this is basically people who are of the liberal mind, many of them who Obama even appointed.
Yeah. We've got enough problems with the court. The last thing we need is a far-right Republican president in 2016 appointing the next two justices that retire.
Exactly.
That's trouble. The only reason we were all sitting on pins and needles waiting for Lyle today to come back from the Supreme Court is because there was a chance it was a 5-4 split. Mm-hmm. And if we have a Republican president, make the next two nominations, say goodbye to 5-4.
Oh, for sure, yes. And also let's bring up the fact that in the ruling, I believe it was Kennedy, I'm not 100% sure on this, said that the government could pay for contraception when employees refuse. And to me, does anything, if you want to really pick and choose here, there's no doubt about it, this was a bad ruling and it's just bad news. But if we want to try to get nuggets of positivity just to make ourselves feel better out of this, things like this could just enforce the overwhelming opinion in this country to continue to fight for a public option, single payer. And when rulings like this come down, yes, it hurts and it's bad. But if we want to look on the bright side of things, if more things go in this way, and things continue to get bad like this, then more and more people who maybe didn't pay attention before or who didn't have an opinion before on it, they will see that, it doesn't work like this. We need a single payer. We need the public option. And if anything comes out of this like that, then it's, we just got to take it. Take what we can get out of it,
For sure. And we have to understand that part of the reason that this is happening, we all know, everyone listening to this show knows the Supreme Court is political. We just know. Even your libertarian listeners get that, right?
Yes.
And so the fact that the limitation on this decision is they tried to make a qualification that says it does not provide a shield for employers who might cloak illegal discrimination as a religious practice.
Yes.
So that means discriminating against me because I'm walking around with a uterus is just fine, apparently. I don't know if that's the Supreme Court saying, don't worry, we're misogynistic, but we're not racist. I don't know what that is, but it should be concerning to everybody whether or not you use birth control. That seems to be the direction they're going. It opens the door to more of this,
And they also specify that this ruling only covers the mandate. For example, if your religious beliefs don't believe in vaccinations, then you can't tell your employees that they can't get vaccinated. Come on, we just hate women. We're not conspiracy theorists.
Right. We're not out of our minds. We just really don't like women. And to just to drive it home, can you imagine? I'm a cis woman, and it's hard for me now to get more access to healthcare. Can you imagine a trans person sitting in that interview? How does that affect their access to care, which is already a problem? We're literally, rulings like this take the most marginalized groups in our country and further marginalize them. Alito and Kennedy and Scalia never have to worry about any of their family members ever having access to care. They're just not a thing. Even if we made everything illegal, their family would still have access because they have money. And so this is just another one of those 1% sitting on the court in their, glass marble house back there behind their 100-foot buffer zone that none of the rest of us get anymore. I mean, it's a little bit ridiculous. And it's like you said, I mean, even people who feel like they don't have a lot of power at the federal level when they vote, this is the reason. This is the reason you vote.
Oh, of course, yes. And also to go along with why the justices don't care, let's be honest, some of them are going to be dead by the time it really matters. So, I mean, I'm glad we had you on for this, because I really, people wanted the serious discussion that we had with Ian Millhiser, and then I'm sure there's people who just wanted to rage with you and I. So thank you so much. And before we let you go, though, this last week you were on Ring of Fire show with Sam. Yeah. And you were discussing the McCullen decision with the buffer zone. And for the listeners who don't listen to both shows, which you should, but I'm sure there's listeners who don't have the time for both. For our listeners here, though, I would really like for you to share, your personal experience. You had stories about how you're one of the people who volunteer to help, basically safely get women to these clinics, where now apparently, since this Supreme Court ruling, there will be no laws allowed where they can't get yelled at in front of the clinics and be called murderers or be thrown at them or whatever. They can't be. It'll be cool for them to be harassed from now on. So if you could just share, what your experience with that is.
Sure. The short explanation of McCullen, so far as we can discover it, is it challenged the 35-foot buffer zone in Massachusetts that was put in statewide after several people were murdered. Okay, so several people were murdered, and the state decided that they would limit free speech the way we've done since the founding of our country. We balanced public safety and free speech, and they asked protesters and picketers to stay 35 feet back from the doors of clinics in Massachusetts. The religious right picked this really nice-looking grandma lady who calls herself a sidewalk counselor. For those of you keeping track of conflicts on the court, Scalia's wife is a well-known registered sidewalk counselor. And so
I love the term sidewalk counselor too. Like if someone was like, I'm throwing dust at them, I'm a voodoo doctor. Like that would work. But sidewalk counselor sounds nice.
And people should understand that counseling happens inside the clinic. If you want a good depiction, go see the movie Obvious Child anyway, because it's hilarious from beginning to start. But they actually, the producer and the director worked with Planned Parenthood and actually used a Planned Parenthood script and a Planned Parenthood clinic for the appointment that the main character, Jenny Slate's character, has with her doctor about her unplanned pregnancy.
Movie, yes.
They discussed options. That's happening inside the clinic. We don't need unlicensed counselors outside the clinic, even if they were there with goodwill. So in a country where we've had 300 individual acts of violence against clinics just from 2010 to 2012, the Supreme Court decided, based on no legal precedent, by the way, if you read Supreme Court Justice Roberts' decision, there's no legal precedent. They basically just say, we think she seems nice, and she should be able to go up to patients whenever she wants.
Mm-hmm. So I assume though, from your experience, though, you have seen differently.
Of course. And
yes.
Only the Massachusetts buffer zone is struck down. But what happens is that anyone that's written not specifically for a clinic is now up for a challenge. The buffer zone in Englewood, New Jersey, that I helped get passed, is now up for a challenge. Luckily, the city attorney is like, nope, sorry, we like it, and they're going to fight back. But in smaller communities or cities or towns or states that are already strapped for funding, you're going to see legal challenges all over the country. And I didn't hear of any clinics where it was worse than usual. I was in Queens on Saturday, and we had our normal 15 to 20 picketers. In New York, by the way. That's Safe Boo, New York, y'all.
It's amazing. I'm a Queens resident, and it shocks me that that's happening in Queens. It is. If that's in Queens, Queens is literally the most diverse county in the country. And if that's happening in Queens, I can only imagine what goes on and how far it goes in areas in the United States where it's not so, liberal.
For sure. And people should know, this is actually a situation where you have a lot of power locally. You don't even have to put on a vest and stand in front of a clinic to volunteer. If you know of a clinic in your city, and check it out, see if there is one. If it has picketers, you can call the police. You can call the police every time they're there and report the disturbance. Don't call 911, call the non-emergency number. But it's worked at several clinics across the country where just local people calling up and saying, this is so annoying. It has stopped the picketing. So that's really important for us to do ahead of buffer challenges, is for local police to have to have the understanding that communities support the clinic and they don't support the picketers. So check it out, see if there's something going on in your community, and if there is, report it.
Katie, thank you so much for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Katie Klabusich. You could find her at katiespeak.com or at Katie_speak on Twitter.